Grab your coat and a handful of glitter, and enter a wonderland of fog and fabulousness. So long, inhibitions. Hello, San Francisco. San Francisco is a 7 by 7 mile peninsula that looks like California's thumb, pointed optimistically upwards. Take this as a hint to look up. You'll notice San Francisco's crooked Victorian rooflines, wind-sculpted treetops, and fog tumbling over the Golden Gate Bridge. Heads are perpetually in the clouds atop San Francisco's 48 hills. Cable cars provide easy access to Russian and Nob Hills, and splendid panoramas reward the slog up to Coit Tower. Earn exhilarating highs on Telegraph Hill's garden-lined stairway walks, and wind-swept hikes around Land's End. If there's another kind of high you're seeking in San Francisco, that can also be arranged, marijuana is legal here for adults 18 and over with ID, and dispensaries and delivery are at your service. When the bridge opened in 1937, the weight of the bridge along with its anchorages and approaches was 894,500 tons. Redecking in 1986 reduced the total weight to 887,000 tons. The bridge's two main cables are each 7,659 feet long, over 3 feet in diameter, and contain 27,572 parallel wires. The largest cables ever spun, they're long enough to circle the world at the equator more than 3 times. To spin the cables, 80,000 miles of steel wire less than 0.196 inch in diameter were bound in 1,600-pound spools and attached to the bridge's anchorages. A fixture within the anchorages called a strand shoe was used to secure dead wire, while a spinning wheel, or sheave, pulled a live wire across the bridge. Once it reached the opposite shore of the gate, the live wire was secured onto the strand shoe, and a wheel returned with another loop of wire to begin the process again, one wire at a time. The cables for the Golden Gate Bridge were spun from tower to tower, anchorage to anchorage. The spinning was tedious. Not only did it take time for the spinning wheel to travel the mile between the two shores, but the work had to be performed in a precise sequence, in order to create the balance needed for the cables to absorb the proper amount of wind pressure. There are about 600,000 rivets in each 746-foot-tall tower. When the original rivets become corroded, they're replaced with galvanized high-strength bolts. Opening day was pedestrian day, and 15,000 people an hour went through the turnstiles, each paying 25 cents to cross. Some traversed the bridge on stilts and roller skates or on unicycles. Vendors set up along the roadway sold an estimated 50,000 hot dogs. The 50th anniversary was a disaster. Officials expected a maximum of 50,000 people to attend the bridge's 50th anniversary celebration on May 24, 1987. Instead, 800,000 people showed up, and what happened next, as described in a report filed the year after the incident, sounds like a nightmare. The Golden Gate Bridge responded visibly to the large live load with a reported deflection of its roadway of almost 10 feet at the midspan. The situation was compounded by the 17 miles per hour winds blowing across San Francisco Bay. Suspension bridges are vulnerable to weather loads and, while the bridge was swaying from side to side because of the winds and flattening under the heavy live load, near-panic conditions resulted. People were suffering from nausea and claustrophobia in the density of the crowd, making it increasingly difficult to alleviate the situation by directing the people away from the bridge. The whole bridge flattened out, its whole arch disappeared, Gary Giacomini, president of the Bridge District Board, said at the time. The bridge had the greatest load factor of its 50-year life. The suspension cables at the center of the bridge were stretched as tight as harp strings, while the lower cables near the tower seemed to flap in the wind. I thought, wow, this isn't a good idea. But there was never any reason to fear. According to the report, the bridge deck was designed to move 15 feet vertically and 27 feet from side to side. It's a star. The bridge has appeared in many films, including The Maltese Falcon, 1941, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978, Interview with the Vampire, 1994, and The Rock, 1998. The bridge has even been featured on the cover of the February 26, 1976 issue of Rolling Stone. At 9:40 a.m. on the morning of August 11, 1934, Alcatraz's first group of prisoners, 137 in all, arrived at the soon-to-be infamous prison. For decades, it was known as the site of one of the most unforgiving federal prisons in the country. "Break the rules and you go to prison," went one anonymous quote. "Break the prison rules and you go to Alcatraz." Life at Alcatraz wasn't always so bad. Known as the Rock, Alcatraz developed a reputation for segregating America's incorrigible from the rest of the population. Sometimes, rules dictated that prisoners couldn't even speak to one another. But conditions inside the prison weren't as harsh as movies and television would later portray. Inmates often got their own cell, and some even asked to be transferred there because the potential for violent trouble was low. The reason some of the more notorious criminals of the era were sent there was usually due to the facility's strict routine. Prisoners had little leeway or privileges outside of the four basics: food, shelter, clothing, and medical care. One perk? Hot showers. Inmates got warm water to use for bathing, although it wasn't for altruistic reasons. A theory has it that if prisoners got used to warm water, they'd freeze up if they ever made an escape attempt in the bay's frigid conditions. Many know the story of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, who famously attempted to escape the prison island in 1962 using a raft made out of raincoats. No one knows whether the men made it, but the odds were stacked against them. Of the 36 men who fled from the site in the 29 years it was open, 1934 to 1963, 23 were recaptured, 6 were killed by guards, and 2 drowned. The remaining 5, including Morris and the Anglin brothers, made it to the water and disappeared. Alcatraz was closed in 1963 because it was too expensive to maintain.